Okay, so welcome everybody. And today's presentation is going to be around promoting your idea for funding and support using a pitch deck. Now, it's so frustrating. I've had a conversation with somebody in the middle of last year who works with the corporates, and we were talking about organizations pitching for funding from the corporates. And he was telling me just how frustrating it can be, because people were telling us what they, in his words, people were telling them what they wanted, but not what the corporates were looking for. There was no match between, this was happening on a regular basis, what the organizations that are and businesses that were approaching them and how they wanted to interact through their responsibility. So it was interesting to hear that coming from the other side of the fence, because I've seen it on the side of the fence where especially I have a few clients at the moment who are saying they're trying to approach, they could be approaching corporates, they could be approaching local government councils, they could be approaching, I'm looking at trade associations, and they're finding it so frustrating because they're saying these people have no idea what we really do and the difference we make. There's such a lot of passion out there, but there's a disconnect between the two sides of what could be a really, really good relationship. So my name is Pat Gross of the Community Entrepreneur. And here's a little bit of my background. Because I worked for a Victorian funding body for a decade, I'm the owner of the Community Entrepreneur and the Grant Writing Help Desk. And I've been lucky enough and fortunate enough along the way to meet some really big-hearted people, and I'm still meeting them now, who are really passionate about what they do, and they do a lot in the community. And I've learned a few lessons along the way with a few stories, which I'm going to present as part of this presentation. So yes, we're going to talk about promoting your idea for funding and support using a pitch deck. Right, so what is a pitch deck? We always think of, it's a PowerPoint presentation type thing, and that's it. It's actually a vision presentation that tells the story of your organization or your cause to persuade and engage potential collaborators, funders, investors. And it's a concise overview of your business plan, your programs, your services, your outcomes, how you're being sustainable. But what it is the first step in building relationships and getting funders excited about your organization. So why should potential funders be excited about your proposition? As I said earlier, we're so passionate. I can think of charities that I've worked with in Melbourne that have been working and looking for food and helping, especially during COVID, going out and looking for donations. But the question there is, it's a two-way street. And going and asking for what you want without doing your homework, without checking out what their priorities are, actually adds to this frustration. So just remembering that it is a two-way street. Let's have a look at this. You have to do your homework here. Who, what, where, why, when, and how. And I'm just going to go into this. Right, okay. So you really need to do your prep work with some clarity. It's interesting, a few stories. the community organisations, as an example, want to raise their profile with local government, and that's where I find a lot of sticking points, where neighbourhood houses, for example, who are doing some great work, food relief work, they're doing work in the community, but they're at odds with, not all of them, there's examples of them, where they're at odds with their local council, who seems to ignore what they're doing. This is from the perspective of the houses, seem to be ignoring what they're doing. But the problem is that they're not actually speaking the same language. And I had a client who wanted a new, an extra facility, a new building. And they've been working on the local government for a period of 10 years. And they were pitching and they were pitching and they were telling them, you know, they needed more space, etc. But they were talking on deaf ears, because it was a case of the people they were talking to and trying to get the information through to, but the more than anything, it's because they were not talking according to the council's priorities. So I went through a mentoring program with the CEO of one organization, and we looked at different aspects. And one of those aspects was, what is it that what is the language of the local council? What are their priorities? Now, each council has got, at the bare minimum, their plan for a four-year period. So we got to looking through that, picking out some of the priorities, and when they're with that plan, there are other plans as well, so that they were able to identify the areas that they could add value to what the council was doing. And through that, they were also able to open the doors to departments that could support them in their bid for an extra facility. We also worked with them to actually recognize that rather than being managers of organizations, they were the CEO of organizations, and therefore they had the ability, on paper anyway, to actually contact the higher echelons of the council structure, not sort of stuck there looking at the workers, but actually to stand in their own identity. Now, the outcome of that was simple. They actually got, within an 18-month period, a second location. And the second location was actually right across the road from where they were. So that was changing. So pitching was talking about changing the language, being clear, and being able to articulate in the words of the people that they're trying to work with. So that first time they managed to, or they attempted to correlate with the organization they were pitching to, they managed to start opening doors that had not been opened for 10 years. I remember in the Murrumbidgee Shire in Victoria, a group of organisations came together, had a meeting with the mayor, and the mayor turned around and said to them, we don't talk to you because you don't have enough members in your organisation. So when you're pitching, also let them know your community support or your market support, so that they know that they're talking to not just, you know, an insignificant representation of the community or the marketplace, but you're talking to a bigger representation. And in this case, they were sort of, you know, not many, didn't have a strong membership base, yet a community, a community group, a local sort of a geographic group a bit further down the road, had a groundswell of supporters, and they were getting their messages heard 100% of the time. So make sure that you have got your unique value proposition when you are putting something forward as to why you stand out from the rest. Be clear about your goals, be clear about the evidence, and consider who will be in the room. Who are you going to need to convince There's always somebody, that negative person or that person of authority, somebody, you know, the gatekeeper to the decision making. Be clear about their goals and consider that what you want to achieve. Now, corporate social responsibility, if you're going to be approaching the corporates, they have now there is required to have a CSR statement and the environmental social governance, the sustainability. It's easy to find out what their priorities are. It's called the internet. Go on there, look up their corporate social responsibility. It may be hidden at the bottom of the website through more specific searches, through their annual reports or their governance, but you will find, or even I've actually sort of just recently used AI, and I asked about the corporate CSR for the top 5 businesses in this case it was Wagga Wagga, and it came out with those businesses, and it gave me the actual CSR statements for those organizations. So I really didn't need to do much digging. Same with environmental social governance. Now, the bigger the organization, or even if it's an organization in town that wants to go for awards, for example, the criteria for business awards now works very specifically to say, what are you doing in the corporate social responsibility and environmental sustainability field? So there's business, even medium-sized businesses in your own area that would benefit from having a relationship with yourselves. So there's ways to look. There's the mission. Make sure you've got a really good mission that they can hang on to. Look at their strategy plans, their annual reports. Look at their media articles. Get a good idea of who they are before you even start to put together a proposal. Think about, how do they see you? And if they don't actually understand who you are and what you do, this is where they now start to introduce the power of stories. Now we're talking about, you know, if you're going to put together a pitch, this is the straightforward, this is what you do. The very, very sort of, you know, give them a good introduction about what we do, who we do. This is your checklist. And yes, there is a typo coming up in the next slide. What the problem statement is that you're wanting to resolve, where you've both got a common interest. Otherwise, if you're trying to get them to come and help you to solve, you know, to overcome this, and it's just not within their interest, and this is where the problem is, it's not going to work. So what is the result that you're trying to achieve? What is the community or market size and the opportunity? What are the products, programs, and services you're going to be offering? How far have you got to date? Who's involved? Who's your team? Okay. This can be a bit sensitive, but I've just put the word alternatives. It could be who is the competition, what they're not doing. What are the alternatives? Now, if you're a community organization and you've really, you know that some of those alternatives out there are in competition in many ways, then just show why you've got that unique value. I know some of the organizations I work with, whenever there is an emergency, it doesn't matter what plans are in place in the community people themselves will gravitate to those organizations. So it's, if you know that, get your data there and show people, and say, yes, this can have, you know, this can be in place, but people come here instead. Now, make sure you've got your data, make sure you've got the finance, and make sure you've got your return on investment and how the money is going to be used. This is just a straightforward, simple, plain structure of what, you know, it's a business case, to be honest, but there's a key to this, and that is to make sure that you're always referring back to the research that you've done. So what do I mean here? Okay, You present the data and tell the story. I have been in the sessions with community organisations, and you can relate this to businesses as well, but community organisations that have actually putting a pitch together to get collaborative funding and support from local government. And government wants to see figures to be able to justify a decision. But what they want to hear are the stories. So it's a simple balancing act. How do you get the figures across? So, and that's usually the visual on the presentation, because there are people in the room who are quite digital, who are quite anal, who want to see the data. But there are as many people in the room who want to hear the stories that bring the data to life. So present the data, but make sure that you tell the story. And through telling the story, as I said, you do touch on the heartstrings, and you do actually create ideas on the other side of the fence. So it's a quick summary, because this is a short presentation. To be able to put together a really good presentation, be in mind that it is a two-way street. As I said at the beginning, the number one problem that organizations that are being pitched to here is it's all about being pitched. What they want to know is how they can collaborate, and it's a two-way process. So align and make sure that your values are aligned, what you want to do is aligned, and that you're talking their language, and it's going to provide a benefit. Do your homework to talk their language, and then present the data and tell the story. Next time, we're going to do, going back to the grant space, to how to build a business case for a grant or almost anything.